Do you want to learn the basics of modeling walls in Revit? Then stick around. Hey there, I'm the Revit Man, and in this tutorial we'll be covering the basics for modeling walls in Revit 2021, and I'll be showing you a few tips and tricks along the way to help improve your modeling efficiency. But before we dive into the actual tutorial, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button so that when I upload new content, you won't miss a thing. Let's dive in. So before we actually get into Revit, I wanted to go over what system families are, because Revit considers walls as system families. So system families are built-in components in Revit. So these are items that are your basic building blocks: walls, roofs, floors, stairs, railings, as well as a few in the MEP realm as well. So if you would like to learn more about system families and other types of families in Revit, I will leave a link to my blog in the description below the video. All right, let's dive into Revit. Okay, so the wall tool is located in the architecture tab or in the structures tab. You can even select WA to initiate the wall tool. So Revit, like many other pieces of software, have keyboard shortcuts associated with the tools in that software. I highly encourage you to go and take the time to learn those keyboard shortcuts because it will greatly improve your modeling efficiency. So there's three basic types of walls in Revit. So you have your basic wall, a curtain wall, and a stacked wall. And you can see all the walls that are loaded into the project here in this in your properties browser here. So you'll see stacked wall, curtain wall, and your basic walls. And for this tutorial, we're just going to stick with the generic 8-inch. So whenever we initiate a tool in Revit, oftentimes you'll see a contextual ribbon that pops up. So it'll be slightly colored a little bit green, as you see here. And then you'll notice that the draw panel here shows up. And these are the basic tools that we're going to be going over in this tutorial on how to draw walls. You also want to draw your attention here to the options bar. So this options bar will aid in the drawing process for a number of tools. So make sure you always look here to see if any other additional parameters or settings show up that might add efficiency into your modeling. All right, so by default, when you start the wall tool, you'll see that the line drawing tool is selected. So to use this tool, you're going to click to start, and then you're going to click to finish, and you've drawn a wall. So to end a command, you can either right click and hit cancel, or you can just press the escape button and you'll set to draw another wall. So we're going to draw another wall now, and but this time I want you to hold shift when you draw, and you'll notice that the wall then snaps to the orthogonal. I also want you to take note of a couple of other things here. One is the blue dashed line that appears as I'm drawing this wall. And that blue dashed line, I call it the aligning line. I don't know if there's a specific term for it from Autodesk. But basically what this is it helps you understand if you're locked to a certain angle or dimension, or there's some sort of relationship to another element. Like here, this is in plane with the element, this is parallel with the element. Kind of helps with the snapping of elements to other elements. And then you also notice the blue dimension string that shows up. So these are called temporary dimensions, and you will use these extensively in Revit whether you're just laying something out or you're adjusting an existing layout. These are used extensively in the Revit environment. Okay, so before we move on to the next drawing tool, I wanted to call your attention to a couple of other tools in the options bar for walls. The first one is the offset parameter. So here you can go and type in, let's say we type in 1 foot. You'll notice that now you'll see the blue aligning line where I'm actually drawing it, but you'll notice that the wall itself is actually offset off of that line by the distance that you specified. So I find a lot of use out of this tool off of the offset parameter for when I'm like drawing a corridor or something like that, and I need a specific distance from one wall to the next. Or you can do it from an exterior wall to a property line. All right, the next thing I would like to draw attention to is this checkbox here that says chain. And what this does, I'll show you what it does when it's checked first, and then I'll show you what it does when it's unchecked. So when it's checked, you'll notice that I can draw additional walls, and the start point is the end point of the previous wall. So if I uncheck chain, you'll notice that when I finish this wall, it doesn't continue another one after it. I have to click it. You have to do your start, stop, click like we did with our first wall that we drew. Okay, so the next drawing tool that we'll be going over is the rectangle tool. And it does exactly what the name implies. You draw a rectangle or a box. So for this one, you're clicking a start point, and then you're clicking an end point. Notice that you get the temporary dimensions in both the X and the Y axes. So I use the rectangle tool extensively when I'm laying out a project initially. I'm drawing forms, massing, trying to lay out program sizes, a lot of the preliminary layout stuff. I'm not necessarily using it later on in the project when we already have rooms and relationships established. Okay, so the next drawing tool, the next two drawing tools are pretty similar. You've got the inscribed polygon and the circumscribed polygon. And I'm going to bring you back here to high school geometry. An inscribed polygon is where the vertices of the polygon are in line with the radius of a circle that would run through all those vertices. And the circumscribed polygon is one in which the center point of each side is on that circle. So you'll notice here as I was hovering over these two tools, a tooltip popped up. And in Revit, you'll find that a lot of times there's text, images, and even sometimes little animations that pop up. So these are a good way to understand what a tool does if you're not quite familiar with all that it can do. So we're going to start with the inscribed polygon. And I want to draw attention here to the options bar again. And you'll notice here that another parameter popped up for the number of sides. So here you can easily change the number of sides for whatever shape you are trying to draw. In this case, drawing a pentagon. So for this tool, you're clicking the center point, and then you're dragging it to specify the radius of that inscribed or circumscribed polygon. So again, center point, and then defining the radius. So pretty self-explanatory on how to do those. And then the next tool then would be the circle tool. And this is drawn exactly the same way you would do the polygons, except for the fact that we don't have a number of sides. So again, here you're going to hit center point, then you're going to specify the radius. So one quick way, so if you have a bunch of circles that you want to draw that are all the same size, one thing you can do is click this radius checkbox and specify a radius. So if I want to specify an 8-foot radius and draw a bunch of circles with an 8-foot radius, you can just keep clicking the center point. Okay, so I'm going to skip these next few tools here and we'll come back to those in just a little bit. The next tool I'm going to use then is the Ellipse tool. And this is similar to some of the other polygon tools. The only difference here is that with an ellipse, you're specifying a radius in two directions. So you're specifying the center point and then the radius in the X and the radius in the Y direction. But other than that, it's the same drawing process as the other polygons. Moving on to the arc drawing tool. So we're going to start here with this start end radius arc. And to draw this one, you're going to click the starting point, you're going to specify an end point, and then you notice that we can specify any radius after that. The next tool then is center radius arc. So this one's drawn very similarly to the polygons. You're going to specify the center point, and then you're going to specify the radius, and then what extent of that arc do you want to draw. Okay, so we're going to skip over these next two tools and come back to them in just a sec. So we're going to use the partial ellipse tool next. So the partial ellipse tool, we're going to specify the start point, the end point, and then you're actually going to specify the radius. Okay, so you'll notice that these next two tools here, the tangent end arc and the fillet arc, they're colored blue, and that's for a reason. So if I start clicking on, select the tangent end arc and I start clicking around the screen, you're going to notice that nothing happens. I'm not drawing an arc at all. And the reason for that is that these tools require a previously drawn element in order to use this tool. So you notice that I can snap to the endpoints of these previously drawn walls. So with the tangent end arc, you click the starting point, and this point right here will always remain tangent to that previously drawn wall. And then you can just go and start specifying, distances and radiuses that you deem necessary for your project. In other drafting software, you may be able to use splines to draw walls, but in Revit you cannot, at least not in this particular method of drawing. I will show you in a future tutorial how to get a spline wall, but to bypass that, I use this tangent end arc to create any sort of spline shape that I'm looking for. And the nice thing about that is, with the tangent end arc, you have specific arc lengths and angles and radiuses because they are segments of a circle or an arc. So when it comes to constructing this, it's much easier to document and construct than it would be if you were using a spline. Okay, so we're going to move on to the fillet end arc. And what this does, let's zoom in on one of these polygons. You want to click a starting wall and a second wall. And you'll notice that the fillet arc then rounds the joint between them. And you can do that with any two walls that are tangent, near tangent, intersecting, parallel. There's a bunch of uses for using this tool. One thing to note here too is that you can also specify a radius like we did with the circle. So if you're making a lot of fillets that are the same radius, just go and click the radius button, enter in an arc, in this case 4 feet, and I can just go in and fillet all of these intersections. Okay, so moving on then to these last two tools, and you notice that those ones are green, and I am actually going to move on to level 2 to better illustrate what those are. And I'm going to enable massing first, because that's going to help with one of the tools, as you'll see here in a second. Alright, so I'm going to go back into the wall tool then, and these two are green, and that's because you have to select an already existing element in order to use those tools. So we'll use pick lines, and as the name implies, you're going to select a line, and it's going to draw a wall to the extent of that line. Now, I use this a lot when I have an existing CAD file or an as-built drawing, a PDF, something of that nature that I want to quickly convert then into Revit geometry. Then it's just a matter of selecting a bunch of walls or selecting a bunch of lines to create the walls that you need. Okay, so the last tool then on the drawing toolbar here is the Pic Basis tool. And the easiest way to show this is I'm going to move to a 3D view. So up here in the quick access toolbar, there's the little house icon, which is a 3D view. And this box right here is a massing element, and in a future tutorial I will go over massing and how that works. But what you'll notice here is that it's a Pic Basis, so I get to go, as I hover over this massing object, you'll notice the different vertical faces that highlight are faces that I can apply a wall to. So if I just go and select those, I can very easily apply a mass. So this I use a lot when I'm moving from a conceptual design into a more concrete design, a more schematic level project or phase of a project. The nice thing about this is that if that conceptual design changes, like if this wall got taller or this mass got taller, I can very easily then select all these walls. So to select a chain of walls, you hover over one and you press tab. You'll notice that the whole chain then highlights, and then you can select the chain at a time. And you'll notice up here and then in the toolbar here that there's this update to face. And I select that, and those walls automatically adjust to the changes you made to that massing element. So this is a real quick and easy way if you're still working on some design elements and at the conceptual level, and you're trying to move on to the next phase of the project, and you make a change in one, you can easily update it to another. Okay, so this wraps up the basics of modeling walls in Revit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. Please leave a comment if you have any questions about anything that I've covered in this tutorial. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, please click on my Revit Walls playlist. Thanks for watching.